So I got a really good question recently, and there were several parts to it. Um, and the gist of it was, you know, it seems like my approach to the Bible and theology and things like this is really more atheistic or agnostic, even though I, claim to come from a Christian perspective. And the reason for that is because of how it seems that I understand the Bible and the fact that it maybe does not, maybe that it has errors and that it's not inerrant or something like this. And the question basically was asking, how can you be a Christian and believe that the Bible has errors or something like that? And so what I'll say is a couple of different things. First, I don't believe that you have to believe that the Bible is inerrant or that the Bible does not have errors in order to be a Christian. There are many Christians that would not affirm inerrancy. There are many Christians that identify as evangelical that would say this. Obviously, there's liberal Protestantism, which that wouldn't affirm inerrancy. I think the Eastern Orthodox Church certainly has a different way of framing their understanding of the Bible than modern Catholics and Protestants. And so it's certainly not necessary. It's not central to the definition of a Christian to believe in biblical inerrancy or to believe that the Bible does not have errors or something like this. Full disclosure, just in response to this question, I will give my perspective on, where I'm coming from. I would characterize myself as a Christian agnostic. For those of you that haven't heard this term or are unfamiliar with it, I'm not just making it up. There's an entire community of Christians who identify by this term, and basically, I'm sure that there are various nuances of how people understand it, and so I can give my perspective of what I believe it means for me. First, I would say I'm agnostic in the sense that I don't know if God exists, and I don't know if Jesus literally rose from the dead. I certainly wouldn't affirm these things with any level of certainty. These are things that I'm still trying to figure out, and I think that the data on things like this is really difficult, to pull out one side over the other. And so the basic gist of what it means to be a Christian agnostic, the reason I would say I would still identify as a Christian is, well, for one, I have been raised in and live in Christian community, and so that's the water in which I swim, right? It's just everything that I know, my culture, everything about the conditioning of my thinking and perspective and values, my approach to life, it is all within the framework of Christianity. So that's the first reason that I would still identify as a Christian. I also believe that it does work, it does have value. I don't think that Christianity would be what it is today if there wasn't something true to it. And that's not to say that there isn't truth in other worldviews, because I believe that there is. But again, this is the one that I'm a part of, and so it would almost kind of be senseless for me to pluck myself out of it, because my whole community basically identifies as a Christian community, and I do believe our culture, my modern Western culture, is largely influenced by Christian values. So there would be no reason for me to just outright reject it. In terms of, for those people that might want to say, well, okay, so you're not a Christian then if you don't actually believe that Jesus, died for you and rose from the dead. It is believing these things that defines what Christianity is. And I would say that's some people's definition, but there is no standard. There's no standard of authority that gives us a definition of what Christianity is. Not even something like the Bible. There's no definition of Christianity in the Bible. The closest thing we get, really, is in the book of Acts, when it talks about how they were first called Christians, followers of Christ, little Christs, and they were members of the Way. Okay, so the Way are basically the disciples of Jesus and those in the community who chose to follow the way of Jesus of Nazareth. So even though Jesus was a Jew and the people in this community came out of Judaism, they changed their worldview in various ways, and so became, as members of the way, what we now call Christians. So I think really the definition of a Christian is very broad, and I think it is up for debate, and it is defined differently by different people who identify as Christians. So, as to the extent that I do believe that the things that Jesus said and possibly did had truth value, and do give some meaning to our lives, and they do work for our lives, and I am a part of that movement, I would say that I'm a Christian in that sense, for sure. There's a difference, I think, between something that we claim to believe versus the way that we behave, right? The way that we respond to the actual deeper beliefs that we have. And so I think that's an important distinction to make for the people that might suggest that you have to claim to believe X, Y, and Z, like these certain things, doctrines, in order to be a Christian. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that, a Christian really more so is somebody who actually lives in this mode of being, this way of existing in the world. So, is my approach more atheistic, agnostic? I mean, there is a big agnostic aspect to the way that I have come to perceive the world. I mean, I was raised as a Christian, and I believed everything that I was taught, right? And I delved into it very intentionally and very genuinely. And the more that I investigated it, the more murky things seemed, the more difficult it seemed to try to be able to ascertain what is true, and the things that were foundational, I thought, to what it meant to be a Christian, what it means to be a Christian, those things became less and less certain. And there's a huge community of Christians who acknowledge this, who acknowledge that certainty is not really that helpful in most cases, especially when it comes to something that we believe. There's very little that we can claim that tells us we can be certain about something. Certainly something like this. So, to that part of the question, how can you be a Christian and believe that the Bible has errors? Well, there are those two ways of approaching that question are, one, this is my approach, but also people who do claim to have full certainty of their belief in God and of Jesus' resurrection as Christians, even they wouldn't necessarily affirm biblical inerrancy. So those are kind of two different things. One other part of this question that I wanted to address briefly, though, is this person asked, you say that you want to follow truth wherever it leads, and that seems like an atheistic or agnostic idea. And this is really interesting, and I think this is one of the problems that many people have with Christianity, is that they don't genuinely follow truth where it leads. And there is a lot of intellectual dishonesty, I think. And what I would say is, even if you are a Christian, and there are certainly many Christians and theologians who would affirm this and agree with this, we do want to follow truth wherever it leads, because if you believe in God, you certainly must believe that all truth is God's truth, right? People say this a lot. So I don't think it's necessarily an atheistic, agnostic thing to follow truth where it leads. I think that in many cases, and largely in my case, it seems like when you follow truth, it leads you into an agnostic direction. This happens to many people, and even many Christians who end up losing their faith or become agnostic or something like this. And that's telling. So I think that for any Christians that know of that tendency for others, you might want to pay attention to that and consider what it is and how it is that you're investigating your faith.